I've often said, Mike, that HR, 90% of it's being fair and consistent with your people. I'm not going to tell you there's not issues. They're every day, but there's nothing that beats that fairness and consistency.
Welcome to Get Unstuck and On Target, the weekly podcast that offers senior leaders insights and strategies to not only lead with competence and vision, but also to achieve groundbreaking results. I'm your host, Mike O'Neill. I coach top-level executives on the power of ethical leadership to forge teams to be as united as they are effective. In each episode, join me for insightful conversations with leaders just like you, providing practical advice to help you get unstuck and propel you and your company forward. Let's get started. Joining me is Gary Hall. Gary is the Senior Director of Human Resources for TenCate Grass, the world's fastest growing producer of synthetic turf with annual sales of $1.4 billion. Gary has a BS in Organizational and Human Resource Management, and he is certified by both the Human Resource Certification Institute and the Society for Human Resource Management. Gary, welcome.
Thank you, Mike. Glad to be here.
Gary, as you well know, we decided that we're going to talk about the notion of servant leadership. And just to remind regular listeners, my very last guest, Jonathan Strack, the CEO of Strack Inc., he shared his take of what servant leadership looks like to him from a CEO perspective. And today, I would love to focus most of our time together to do the same. What does servant leadership look like from an HR perspective? Does that work for you?
Absolutely. And I'm looking forward to talking about servant leadership. I think it's vastly underrated and very important to what we do today.
Well, we have had a chance to spend some time together, both of us coming from an HR background. I love to bring HR professionals on this show just because I have nothing but the highest regard for what they do for their respective organizations. Let's talk a little bit about what got you to this point. I know you have a degree in HR and in organizational management. You are working for a large company, but you've worked in different industries up to this point. Can you describe the different types of industries that you have provided HR leadership for?
Yes, Mike. And interestingly enough, I actually, by being in the right place at the right time, started out in the finance world and 14 years in finance. Have a degree in organizational management with that human resource emphasis. And finally, mid-2000s, I decided to make that change over to HR. And my first job, I was working in healthcare. Particularly, I was working in long-term care. And it was, an experience that was beneficial in many ways, but probably most beneficial in that I came in on the ground floor in a industry that requires tons of paperwork and, just due diligence to keep track of things. And there's a lot of systematic values that come out of that that's important for what we do as human resource professionals. From there, I got back into the manufacturing industry and spent about 4 years working for a company that makes gasoline nozzles, those top components that, a lot of people use every day. I've also done some work in automotive, direct automotive manufacturing, and a little bit of time in banking. And now I'm out here in this industry where we actually not only manufacture, synthetic turf, but we actually install and distribute it as well. So a lot of industries over what's not a long period of time.
You have worked in a number of industries. I want to talk a little bit about synthetic turf for a moment because people might kind of scratch their head and say, well, what are we talking about here? In layman's language, how is synthetic turf used?
Well, in particular, TenCate Grass has two specific markets, Mike, and we target athletics and athletic fields. That's a big part of our business. We call it sports industry on our side, and we do a lot of football fields. We do soccer fields. If you get into Europe, we're a worldwide company. We do water polo, or polo fields and polo hockey, I should say, and other various things of that nature as well. We've broadened out. We've done pickleball courts. We have done a wide variety of different things. But there's a different sector of our business as well, which we're deeply rooted in. And that's landscape, and we sell materials. If you want to make your yard a synthetic turf surface, we can get you the materials and get you the help to do that. Even so, it is a wide-ranging business. And when you talk about TenCate Grass, we have locations in virtually every state in the U.S. now, and we do. We distribute out of a couple of different areas, but we do construction out of a wide variety of areas. And in particular, our manufacturing is generally done in our, Chattanooga municipal area, some in 45 minutes of either direction of Chattanooga.
For those not familiar, the flooring capital of the world is Dalton, Georgia. I'm actually speaking to you from Dalton, Georgia. And so you talk about that radius. It's amazing how much of the industry and suppliers to the industry are concentrated in this neck of the woods. Gary, let's go back to the types of things. You've worked in healthcare, you've worked in banking, you've worked in manufacturing. I, too, spent most of my time in HR in a manufacturing setting. For the last 15 years or so in a consulting/coaching role, I've worked in a wide variety of industries. And people might say originally, Mike, I know you come out of manufacturing, but, in engineering, it's different. And when you really get down to it, I find that HR, people, are the same regardless of the industry. And the challenges of HR are just kind of universal. Do you find that to be the case as well as you move from industry to industry?
Absolutely, I do. And, I've often heard that we want somebody that's worked in manufacturing, or we want somebody that's worked in automotive manufacturing, or, and those can be big misnomers in a way, because the reality is it's people and it's relationships. And how good can you do at, being a resource for your people, as well as building relationships with them. And I've often said, Mike, that HR, 90% of it's being fair and consistent with your people. And if you do that, kind of the rest of it goes downhill. The rest of it becomes manageable. I'm not going to tell you there's not issues. There are. They're every day. But, there's nothing that beats that fairness and consistency.
You were given a choice of what you would like to talk on, and you are qualified to talk on a wide variety of potential topics. But you mentioned servant leadership, and I kind of sat up, took notice of that, because that's not necessarily easy topic to tackle. What is it about servant leadership that speaks to you?
Mike, I think what speaks to me is that engagement piece, that if you're truly a servant leader, you're going to get engagement from management, from your employees, and from your customers, because you're going to be reaching out for their input as much as you're giving them input. I often find that servant leaders are thought to be maybe weak, or, maybe not forthgoing enough, or, can actually lead people and make tough decisions. Well, if you're going to be a servant leader that wants to be one of the people, you're probably not going to be able to do those things. And something I've learned over my work career is that if you are going to lead people, you have to lead people, and you have to make tough decisions, and you have to be responsible. More importantly, while you can solicit input from a lot of different groups, they can't be, you have to be the final decision maker. They can't be that decision maker. And you have to be able to make decisions, be able to lead people, but still be able to have relationships, solicit input. And, my current workforce will tell you that I'm often asking for their input, but it's, I have to make those decisions. And eventually, as a leader, you're responsible for the decisions that are made. And you want to make the best possible decision. And what better way to make a decision than engaging with these different groups of people and getting input to make the best possible decision?
Some organizations embrace servant leadership as kind of a core value. That's exactly kind of the way that Jonathan Strack characterized our conversation, and that is servant leadership is just kind of at the core of who we are. And as CEO, I need to effectively model that, as well as those who report to me and throughout the organization. He said something that caught my attention, and it was something like this: Mike, being a servant leader doesn't mean that you are a doormat. And when I heard that, I kind of sat up. When you hear that, do you agree with that comment, that being a servant leader, it does not mean you're a doormat?
Absolutely. And I actually had an encounter with my boss that I think he questioned my ability not to lead necessarily, but to make decisions and to carry things through. And, it became a point of proving that. And once I did, I just turned and looked at him and said, just as a note, I can make the big decisions too. And, it's really important that not only your leaders, but your peers and those people that work for you can see that you can be a leader. To be a servant leader doesn't mean that you're deferring decisions or that you're not going to carry through with something. To a fault, I probably take too long to make a decision sometimes because I'm trying to analyze all the data or everything that's coming in. But, it's important as leaders that you can make decisions, and you want to make the right decision, Mike.
If you're prone to analyze, sometimes we can get kind of caught up with the analysis. When we're talking about serving others while leading, does it kind of come a point where you've done the number crunching, you've got to make a decision, and because you're leading a large team of people that support HR, support those employees, at the end of the day, does it kind of just boil down to common sense?
It does a lot. And, I think if you're going to have value as a senior leader, Mike, the first thing you do is you lead by example. And those examples are portrayed to people. And the people that see you day in and day out realize what kind of person you are. And, probably more importantly, as a servant leader, you have people on your team that you're soliciting advice from. You got to show them why that matters, why it's important. And the biggest thing about servant leadership is you take all these values and you add them together and you encourage teamwork. I'm a big team guy, and I love teams. I like the team concept, and I'm always trying to encourage teamwork. My current team has 11 people on it, and they're spread out all over the place, all over the U.S. And when I came into this about 3.5 years ago, there was no teamwork. It was a lot of individuals, and we have implemented systems and processes, and not only have encouraged teamwork, we have demanded teamwork. And, we put you in a team setting, and it's so we can garner all the value that you have as input into an issue, a problem, a project, whatever. And we want to make that the end result, that process has value because of your input. We think by doing that, we've helped you grow and develop. We're hopefully giving you tools, and we're giving you things that can help you grow and develop your skill set even stronger to be a more valuable person, not only to TenCate Grass, but, in the world in general. There's really a personal aspect to all this too, Mike, though. And, you get a chance to show your team you care, and you care about what they're doing. And it gives value to their work and what they're doing. And it's inherently invaluable to the organization for people to know that their work's valued.
Yeah, as I'm listening to you, I hate to reduce a concept to a word, but the word you just used seems to embody what we're talking about, and that is the word care. If you demonstrate that you genuinely care, people feel that they've been heard. People feel that you've got their back. In a team setting, you're fostering teamwork, and in doing so, they are probably being given opportunities to learn and grow in the process. Am I hearing you describe that correctly?
Absolutely. I think you hit it on the nail on the head. And, there are some caring concepts here that if I'm going to ask you for your input and I'm not going to use it or listen to it, it doesn't have value. And people are not ignorant to that, Mike. They see through that very quickly, and they know what their value is, not only to their organization, but to you personally. And, work's about relationships a lot of times. And it's about being able to build effective relationships and being able, I've always considered human resources to be a back office job. And in the back office, you're supporting a lot. And, you have to be a good support for the people that are making, whether it's in manufacturing, you're making something, you're providing support in order to get our product to our customers. Or, if you're talking something like banking, you're offering support to get the people in that either, work as tellers in banks, or that they're providing information to customers that is both beneficial and meaningful. And so, there's a lot of back office into this, but, there's some leadership concepts that come out of HR as well, particularly around, policy and procedures and things of that nature that are really important to the day-to-day operation of any business.
We talked offline along this line, but let me just kind of set this up. One of the things I found very attractive to HR is the challenge. And the challenge is oftentimes in HR, your role is to be responsive to senior leadership because we're in a support role. At the same time, it can never be a question in the employee's eyes. HR is there to be an advocate for me, the employee. And that is a little bit of a constant tension. And that is, if the whole time you're seen as an employee advocate and you're advocating on behalf of an employee, but you're not paying attention to those business drivers, you're asking for more pay or more benefits or more. If every time you go to senior leadership with your hand out, they begin to say, I don't know if you really understand how difficult it is to be in this business. There's a flip side of that. If all you are doing is providing support to senior leadership and you're not an advocate for the employees, I love that built-in tension. I found that to be most meaningful. And I don't know about you, but what I found is that HR, it's a hard profession. But it seems as if when people make that move into HR, they tend to stick with it. And why? Because you're helping employees on a very personal level. You're building relationships, but those are not necessarily exclusively relationships with employees. You're building relationships with management, senior management. And if you're going to be at the table where key decisions are made, you need to understand the business while also being known as HR is there to be an advocate for the employee. I just rattled off the top of my head something that kind of resonated with me, but I may be way off the mark. How does that sound to you?
You know, there's a lot of truth to that. It is a little bit of a balancing act, that you have the needs of the employees and being that employee advocate, as well as, you know, how's the business doing? And are we profitable? And, you know, payback analysis, you know, cost effectiveness of things you're trying to do. You know, I'd like to take your point and elaborate just a little further, Mike, if I could. One of my mentors and somebody, you know, I'm a big sports guy, and one of the guys I kind of followed through the years, because he coached at David Liscombe in Nashville for many years, and actually got to know him, as a guy by the name of Don Meyer. He was a longtime basketball coach, won the NAIA national championship at Liscombe, but he was a big servant leader guy, and he had 3 rules. He only had 3 rules, and you know, they may sound a little corny, but you know, you got to read into them a little bit, because the first rule is that everybody takes notes. And you know, he thought it set the tone, because he thought that it showed that leaders must learn also. And you learn, you know, regardless of how well you perform or how long you've done it, you know, he thought taking notes was essential to everybody in that whole learning cycle. It helped you learn from your mistakes, and it installed a mindset to where if you were writing it down, you were listening more than you speak. And he thought it was a great servant leader tool. You know, his next one is that everybody says please and thank you. And, you know, I don't make my employees say please and thank you necessarily, but we try to have an environment, Mike, that's conducive to respect and, you know, mutual respect for each other, and a environment to where issues can be freely brought forward, but still, you know, there's a respect for everybody that's in the room. And, you know, with that comes some things you wouldn't think about, is when you compare maybe compliance and commitment. Compliance is where you're doing the bare minimum. You know, commitment's when you're committed to what you're doing. And that's where we want people. We want committed people. And, you know, you want people to feel a sense of entitlement too. And what better way than to give them a voice?
Yeah.
And then, you know, you're trying to keep out division and things that compete against the agenda you're trying to drive. And, you know, that please and thank you, you know, you wouldn't think about it, but that helps those things as well. And his last rule is that everybody picks up the trash.
Yeah.
And it's a servant mindset to pick up the trash. It's, you know, picking up trash is being faithful in little things. And it's about, you know, picking up the trash can be even seeing and seizing opportunities to set a right example. And I had a friend who was a dealer that owned some car dealerships, and every time he visited one, he'd pick up the trash, you know, that was on the floor. And he told people, he said, everybody thinks I pick up the trash because I own the place. but I own the place because I've always picked up the trash.
Mm.
You know, I find that, I think that really drives to the point that he took the time to do the small things, allowed him to do the bigger things. And I think it's just a powerful message about how you set the right example.
I think that's a perfect illustration of servant leadership. It's Don Myers, is that correct?
Don Meyer, yes. And Don coached at David Liscombe for 30 some odd years. And amongst people that counted him as a disciple is one Pat Summit, who about everybody on this podcast will know.
I love that. So true. Everybody takes notes. Say please and thank you, and everybody picks up the trash. What a great way of kind of summarizing this concept. I do want to make sure I do ask you this question, and that is, it's coming. Could you share an example where perhaps you or an organization that you were part of got stuck? And when that happened, what did it take to get unstuck, Gary?
Well, even if I go back to my finance days, Mike, we were built on teams and relationships and figuring out problems. But to specifically answer your question, I will go back to my first HR job working in healthcare. And, there was not only me, but there was a whole new leadership team. My boss was a new person to the organization, and the company was really trying to get on its feet. And now it's one of the biggest long-term care organizations in the U.S. But one thing they decided to do as a company was instill a servant leadership policy. And, they did a lot of things to try to instill servant leadership. It wasn't necessarily about picking up trash, but it was about leaders being able to take care of residents and things of that nature. And, so that people saw you out there working, but also that you could garner ideas for improvement out of, being in the midst of what they consider the everyday battle. And, there were some really great things out of that. And in particular, the building I worked in went from when I arrived from being the worst in the organization in turnover, and having a lot of issues that were regulatory and other things, to becoming the best unit in that organization in about a 4-year period. And 4 years sounds like a long time, but there had to be a there had to be a baseline set and a foundation poured, and then you could build on that. And, once you got, like we were talking about earlier, you got the management on board, you was able to get the employees on board, and eventually, you got your customers, who were your residents, on board. And it was just a great tale in servant leadership about everybody valuing everything that was going on and the opinions that were being held. And it turned out to be a fabulous success story in servant leadership.
Gary, we've discussed a number of topics. We opened with just talking about the organization that you're part of, the HR team that you lead there, your experience in HR in multiple industries, the common thread that runs throughout all, and that is people and what their expectations are. You have shared quite a bit about your interpretation of what servant leadership is and what does it look like. And you gave us one or more examples of those who you have admired, who kind of model what is it we're talking about. What do you want to be closing thoughts and takeaways for us?
Mike, I think if you're going to take away from this and you embrace this servant leadership philosophy, you can build strong teams. You can change your culture relatively quickly, in small groups, and disperse that out to larger groups. You can make things people focused, and there's nothing greater in an organization than people thinking they're involved. And you can boost the morale of your team as well. And, you can have a live, vigorous environment that, comes to work to face the challenges and the tasks that need to be done every day. I'm a big advocate of servant leadership. It doesn't mean you have to be weak or anything like that to be a servant leader. It means you value the people around you and the input they give you.
That's a great summation. Before we conclude, I want to pose a question to our listeners, and that is, are people following you out of necessity or desire? Is it an obligation that drives them, or is it inspiration? As a leadership coach, I aim to address the multifaceted challenges of high-achieving leaders like you, what you face, whether it's feeling stuck despite past successes or struggling to adopt as expectations rise or grappling with the need for a renewed sense of purpose. So I'm here to provide guidance and support, and I do understand the frustrations of navigating these complex issues. My approach is somewhat centered around empowering you to discover your core purpose and maximize your performance. For together, we can overcome obstacles, redefine strategies, and chart a course towards revitalized growth and satisfaction. So if you're ready to take the next step in your leadership journey, I encourage you to reach out. Visit bench-builders.com to schedule a conversation and take the first step towards unlocking your full potential, both professionally and personally. Gary, thanks again for offering your very helpful insights and sharing your expertise.
Thank you for having me, Mike. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to be here.
For those who want to follow up with you or like to learn more, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Yeah, I'll give you two opportunities. My LinkedIn profile is very active, and you can find me there. And also, if you'd like to reach out via email, you can reach me at g.hall@TenCate, that's TenCate, grass.com.
Excellent. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Mike.
I also want to thank our subscribers again for joining us, and I hope you have picked up on some quick wins from Gary that will help you get unstuck and on target. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Get Unstuck and On Target. I hope you've gained insights to help you lead with confidence and drive your organization forward. Remember, at Bench Builders, we're committed to your success, your leadership excellence, and your strategic growth. If you've enjoyed our conversation today, please leave a review, rate, and subscribe to keep up with our latest episodes. This show really grows when listeners like you share it with others. Who do you know who needs to hear what we talked about today? Until next time, I encourage you to stay focused on the target and continue to break new ground on your leadership path.